or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Corrine, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 15th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are: U.S. inflation cooled to 3.5% in June as gas prices declined after President Trump reached a ceasefire deal with Iran. Stocks rose Tuesday as the Dow, S&P 500, and NASDAQ gained 0.02%, 0.38%, and 0.90% respectively. Fed Chairman Kevin Warsh pledged to lawmakers that the central bank will bring inflation down. A Wall Street boom fueled by red-hot stock market debuts and volatility that kept trading floors bustling is leading to surging profits at the nation's biggest banks. IBM shares fell more than 25%, the largest one-day drop on record, after the company issued a rare profit warning, citing a shift in customer spending. The U.S. auto industry has to be prepared to take on China's car makers and expect that one day they will break into America, Ford's executive chairman said. Data center builders and operators across the U.S. are working with bankers to sell majority equity stakes worth tens of billions of dollars in their companies. The union representing Hollywood screenwriters sued to block Paramount's $81 billion acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery. A group of Meta employees is suing the company over how it carried out layoffs, alleging it used AI to disproportionately cut workers with disabilities or on protective leave. BP said it expects further gains from oil trading, but lower upstream production in the second quarter than in the first. Uber is in advanced discussions with Delivery Hero regarding a potential takeover of the German food delivery company. Now for the key articles under the worldwide section. President Trump abruptly reversed course, announcing the end of a plan to charge a 20% fee for commercial ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz, hours before the U.S. reimposed a blockade of Iranian ports. Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University protester, has filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against senior Trump administration officials and 3 private groups. ICE has suspended the use of traffic stops to arrest immigrants following 2 fatal shootings. Michigan state health officials are narrowing in on lettuce as a possible culprit in the rapidly expanding explosive diarrhea outbreak. Trump's pick for Attorney General, Todd Blanche, ran into headwinds in the Senate a day before his confirmation hearing. A new bill that had been championed by the late Senator Lindsey Graham would give Trump fresh authority to impose tariffs on the largest importers of Russian energy. U.S. Coast Guard ships previously deployed in the Middle East are now operating out of Singapore and the Philippines to help challenge China's assertion of power in the Pacific. The House passed legislation to make daylight savings time permanent year-round, advancing a long-standing effort to end the twice-a-year time switch nationwide. American citizens who have recently been in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is dealing with an outbreak of the Ebola virus, can't return to the U.S. until they have spent 3 weeks in another country. The picture on today's front page shows a huge parade down a large boulevard, and in the background is the Arc de Triomphe. And that headline reads, France makes show of EU might on Bastille Day. Esprit de corps. President Emmanuel Macron of France rides in a light reconnaissance vehicle Tuesday on Paris's Champs-Élysées for a Bastille Day parade that featured soldiers from mainly European nations that support Ukraine's war effort. The article, Macron touts EU's military might. European troops march in France's Bastille Day parade to show bloc's unity, by Matthew Dalton, Paris. At Tuesday's Bastille Day parade, French President Emmanuel Macron choreographed a celebration of European unity and military might after nearly a decade in office, prodding the continent's powers to cooperate on defense and rely less on the U.S. Behind the spectacle, however, Europe is struggling to achieve the military independence Macron has long preached. The parade featured 500 soldiers from the Coalition of the Willing, a group of mainly European nations that have pledged to support Ukraine. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and a host of other European leaders attended. They were joined by Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, which now has Europe's largest and most battle-tested standing army after more than 4 years of war with Russia. France paraded its military arsenal from the Arc de Triomphe down the Champs-Élysées to the Place de la Concorde. Tanks, jeeps, and amphibious vehicles rolled over the cobblestones. France's Rafale and Mirage jet fighters flew overhead, joined by jets from European allies. A similar spectacle so impressed President Trump when he attended during his first term that he ordered the Pentagon to top it with a military parade through Washington. Later in the day, France and other European powers announced the transfer of sophisticated military technologies to Ukraine. In just a few years, we will have built new capabilities in Europe and orchestrated a strategic awakening, Macron said on Monday in a speech to the military. Europe is becoming a power. This is the last Bastille Day parade of Macron's presidency. Since taking office in 2017, he has repeatedly lobbied for Europe to have strategic autonomy, the ability to shoulder more of the burden for its defense rather than relying on the U.S. security umbrella. Events appeared to prove him right when Trump upended the transatlantic alliance with threats to take over Greenland and rolled back military aid to Ukraine despite Russian aggression. But efforts to wean Europe off U.S. military backing has been hamstrung by incessant discord among governments over many issues, including how to supply troops with equipment most efficiently, where they should be deployed, and how deeply they should rely on other countries, including the U.S. and China, for weapons or components. The desire of the French government and companies to lead joint defense projects has sometimes spelled the plan's demise. France and Germany in June abandoned a plan to build a stealth fighter jet. Germany pulled out of the project, catching French officials by surprise. France's Dassault wanted to lead the partnership, angering other companies such as Airbus that have a big presence in Germany. Behind such disagreements are more fundamental doubts among a number of European allies about the wisdom of moving away from U.S. technology. The importance of the U.S. was underscored by jets that flew in Tuesday's parade. A number were U.S. aircraft, F-35s and F-16s in the arsenals of European allies. Still, the Trump administration's slashing of military aid to Ukraine has galvanized Europe's resolve to back Ukraine. The result has been billions of dollars of additional funding for European arms companies. Other articles from the front page follow. Trading IPOs fuel bank surge. Collective earnings soared 39%. It's getting close to as good as it gets, Diamond says. By Gina Heeb and Ben Glickman. A Wall Street boom fueled by red-hot stock market debuts and volatility that kept trading floors bustling is leading to surging profits at the nation's biggest banks. J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo collectively earned more than $49 billion, a 39% jump from a year ago, and above analyst estimates. Their combined revenues rose by more than a fifth. The results were strong across consumer businesses, showing the U.S. economy continues to benefit from resilient households and optimistic boardrooms. It's getting close to as good as it gets, J.P. Morgan Chief Executive Jamie Dimon said. We just don't know how long it's going to last. Banks reaped the rewards of the initial public offering of SpaceX, with other blockbuster market debuts such as OpenAI in the pipeline. Goldman led the SpaceX IPO, which helped the bank more than double its fees from equity underwriting to nearly $1 billion. Even without SpaceX, U.S. IPO proceeds more than doubled from the second quarter of 2025, according to Moody's Ratings. The volume of mergers and acquisitions industry-wide in the first half of the year was up by 72% in the U.S. and 45% globally, sending both to the highest level on record in Dealogic data going back to 1995. Still, Diamond pointed to inflation and big fiscal deficits as risks that are shifting below the surface like tectonic plates. And bank executives noted corporate chieftains were still exercising some caution because of the war in Iran. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Inflation in June slowed to 3.5% as oil fell. The benchmark U.S. oil price rose 14% in July through Tuesday. Prices face more upward pressure in July as the U.S.-Iran conflict intensifies, by Matt Grossman. U.S. inflation cooled to 3.5% in June as gas prices declined after President Trump reached a ceasefire agreement with Iran, but renewed fighting in recent days has revived the risks the conflict poses to the nation's economy. The increase in consumer prices last month from a year earlier was smaller than expected and marked an improvement from the 4.2% inflation in May. June inflation was also lower than the 3.8% that analysts polled by the Wall Street Journal expected. Over the month, consumer gasoline prices dropped substantially from May, but even excluding food and energy products, prices were broadly flat, evidence that inflation trends improved. Oil prices, though, have rebounded after the Iran ceasefire collapsed. That suggests July won't bring as much good news as June. Putin is now Xi's junior partner. Years of war and economic isolation have reduced Russian president to a supplicant, by Ling Wei and Thomas Grove. Xi Jinping once admired Vladimir Putin. Now he manages him. 4 years of war and economic isolation have reduced the Russian president to a supplicant in a relationship growing more imbalanced and at times tense. Before Putin made his 14th trip to meet with Xi in China, he publicly signaled that the two countries would strike a breakthrough agreement on energy. Indeed, his May visit had no bigger ambition than persuading Xi to green light a second natural gas pipeline between Russia and China, known as the Power of Siberia 2, a project 2 decades in the making that Moscow desperately needs. But the Russian delegation that flew to Beijing ahead of Putin ran into a brick wall. Chinese officials made it clear to the visiting head of Gazprom, Russia's state-owned gas giant, that they would sign up to the pipeline only if Russia sold them gas at the same lower than market rate Moscow sells domestically, said people with knowledge of the talks. In essence, Beijing was asking the Kremlin to subsidize the project. Driving home their point, Beijing's officials told the Russians not to raise the issue again until the terms changed, the people said. A day later, Putin left the Chinese capital having signed 42 agreements and joint declarations. The pipeline deal wasn't among them. Beijing offered no public explanation. Xi received Putin like an emperor receiving his visitor in his castle, said George Wittke, a veteran German business executive with long experience in China-Russia relations, and sent him home. To be sure, there are no signs the strategic partnership between Beijing and Moscow is about to break apart. If anything, China's support for Russia has only deepened since its invasion of Ukraine. Beijing has kept Russia's war economy running, buying its oil at a discount, supplying the components its defense industry needs, and providing the financial infrastructure that allows Moscow to weather Western sanctions. U.S. and European officials have called on Beijing to pressure Moscow to end the war, to little effect. Xi appears to understand the lesson from the 1960s when the Soviet heavy-handedness toward China as the younger brother helped fracture that earlier alliance. For now, Xi is careful to treat Putin with respect in public, even as he seeks to extract concessions in private. Now for other articles within the paper. Ford executive says prepare to face China by Ryan Felton. The U.S. auto industry has to be prepared to take on China's fiercely competitive car makers and expect that one day they will break into America, Ford Motors executive chairman said Tuesday. We have to go toe-to-toe with China, said Bill Ford, the automaker's executive chair, at an Axios event in Washington on Tuesday. We can't expect to keep them out forever, and we have to be able to beat them at their own game. Ford's remarks come as a bipartisan bill moves through Congress aimed at effectively banning Chinese cars from the U.S. entirely. Ford Motor has said it supports the legislation and its aim of protecting the U.S. industrial base. China's automakers, powered by copious state subsidies and advanced technology, have displaced competitors around the world, but they are currently kept out of the U.S. by tariffs and national security restrictions. Privacy advocates throw shade on Meta's AI smart glasses by Megan Brabowski. Meta Platforms is betting that AI-enabled smart glasses capable of capturing everything you see and hear are the future, and the company is doing all it can to make its fast-evolving devices catch on. Company executives wear smart glasses at public events. Meta donated more than 100,000 pairs to blind veterans on President Trump's birthday weekend, and it has partnered with celebrities and creators, including Kylie Jenner, for help promoting them. Along the way, the camera-equipped audio and video recording devices have become a privacy lightning rod. Meta employees were asked to take them off at a trial where Chief Executive Mark Zuckerberg was testifying earlier this month. On social media, people have complained about being filmed without their knowledge, with accounts surfacing of users disabling the white light that signals the glasses are recording. Meta recently addressed the problem with a software update. The glasses, made in partnership with eyewear giant EssilorLuxottica, was part of Meta's grand plan to control the next phase of the internet. The company is working to bolster the revenue it earns beyond ads and build a future in which artificial intelligence assistants help us live and work. It envisions a future in which consumers still have smartphones, but increasingly use other devices worn on their bodies to talk to AI chatbots, send texts, and take pictures or videos. Meta also is experimenting with different AI device form factors including small devices that users could either wear as a pin, don as jewelry, or put in their pockets, according to people familiar with the matter. Meta has said glasses are likely to be the new dominant form factor for non smartphone AI devices, in part because of what the company believes is a large addressable market. Nearly 2 billion people already wear prescription glasses, Meta executives frequently say. Meta has launched different versions of the product in the past few years. The $499 Oakley sports glasses that offer AI-powered motivation and fitness tracking. $379 Meta Ray-Bans and non-Ray-Ban glasses for $299. The less expensive glasses are meant to help Meta get its device into the hands of as many people as possible. Trump drops plan to charge Hormuz fee. President's decision comes before U.S. reimposes blockade of Iranian ports. By Brian Schwartz and Lawrence Norman. President Trump abruptly reversed course Tuesday, announcing the end of a plan to charge a 20% fee for commercial ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz, hours before the U.S. reimposed a blockade of Iranian ports. Officials were sent scrambling on Monday after Trump announced the policy. Based on highly productive conversations with Middle East leadership, I have decided to replace the 20% United States reimbursement fee with trade and investment deals that the various Gulf states will be making into the United States, Trump said in a Truth Social post on Tuesday. Speaking at the White House during a meeting with Iraqi Prime Minister Ali al-Zaidi, Trump said he was called by different people, different countries, about investing in the U.S. in exchange for his not moving ahead with the planned tolls for vessels in the strait. Trump officials face Mohammad Khalil suit by Joseph D. Avila and Victoria Albert. Columbia University protester Mohammad Khalil has filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against senior Trump administration officials and 3 private organizations, alleging they conspired to deprive him of his constitutional rights. Khalil played a key role in the pro-Palestinian demonstrations that roiled Columbia in the spring of 2024, negotiating with the university on behalf of the students and giving interviews to the media. The green card holder was arrested in March 2025 and detained for more than 100 days as part of the Trump administration's crackdown on what it described as anti-Semitism on college campuses. The Trump administration has tried to deport Khalil, who has lost several battles in immigration court and received a final order of removal this April, an order that he has appealed. He is widely expected to appeal a decision from the Third Circuit Court of Appeals that, if implemented, would leave him vulnerable to redetention and possible deportation. Michigan health officials zero in on lettuce in disease outbreak probe by Jennifer Kalfas and Sabrina Siddiqui. Michigan state health officials are narrowing in on lettuce as a possible culprit in the rapidly expanding explosive diarrhea outbreak, though federal authorities say they are still working to confirm a specific food source as the cause. Donald Prater, The Food and Drug Administration's acting deputy commissioner for food said lettuce is one of the multiple produce items under investigation as officials race to identify the outbreak's origins. Top health officials in Michigan said bagged, pre-washed salad kits could be a particular risk based on the state's review of cases. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, New York's data center self-sabotage. New York's ban on fracking for oil and gas has been an act of monumental self-sabotage. Now Governor Kathy Hochul is making a similar blunder by imposing a one-year, pause on new large AI data centers. Why are Democrats so intent on blocking development that would benefit their citizens? Ms. Hochul announced the moratorium Tuesday in an executive order that suspends permitting for data centers while her administration works on a regulatory framework. As data center development threatens to hike up utility bills, deplete our natural resources, and create uncertainty for New Yorkers, it's my responsibility to take action and lead, she said. Translation: it's an election year. Polls show voters turning against data centers, largely owing to misconceptions fueled by climate activists. Ms. Hochul is trying to get ahead of the backlash and shift blame for her state's rising electric rates caused by its climate policies. Democrats in Albany have shoveled billions of dollars on projects to boost economic growth upstate. So it's strange that Ms. Hochul is spurning data centers, which could generate thousands of jobs and more tax revenue. Teachers in Louisiana's Richland Parish recently received annual bonuses of up to $50,000 thanks to increased tax revenue from construction of Meta's massive AI data center. Data centers can also deliver a property tax windfall that can keep down homeowner bills. In 2025, property tax revenue from data centers in Loudoun County, Virginia, also known as Data Center Alley, accounted for 95% of the county's operating budget. If data centers disappeared, homeowners would need to pay $5,800 more a year in property tax for the same government services, according to one analysis. There's also little evidence that data centers have driven up electric rates. A study last month by the Electric Power Research Institute found that data centers between 2015 and 2024 reduced residential rates by spreading out the grid's fixed cost over a larger electric load. The real problem is that New York's electricity supply is constrained by climate regulations that force natural gas plants to shut down prematurely. Since 2019, 4.4 gigawatts of power have been deactivated, while 2.9 gigawatts have been added. Much of the latter is from renewables that don't provide reliable power around the clock. As the New York Independent System Operator, which oversees the state grid, warned last month the system is losing resources that historically supplied the full suite of dispatchable reliability services. Yet renewables do not yet provide comparable attributes at scale, especially for long duration or severe weather conditions. The report projected that electric vehicles and building electrification, combined with increased peak winter power demand by more than twice as much as the new data centers through 2040. If Ms. Hochul is concerned about power shortages driving up utility rates, she'd push to repeal the state's anti-fossil fuel policies. Her data center pause recalls the de facto fracking moratorium imposed in 2008. 6 years later, then Governor Andrew Cuomo formalized the ban. As a result, upstate New York has languished, while Pennsylvanians next door enjoy more jobs and much lower energy prices. Expect a tragic repeat with data centers. From the opinion pages, no pain, no gain in Iran blockade. Trump's war has a saving grace. Its goals are in alignment with energy realism. By Holman W. Jenkins, Jr. Forcing open the Strait of Hormuz militarily against a littoral state, also known as Iran, armed with drones, mines, and speedboats, is a job the U.S. Navy and Marines could do. It would require ground troops. It would be costly and open-ended. It would also be grossly disproportionate to any investment Donald Trump wished to make in his Iran war. And, as I'll get to, it would be out of sync with the benefit the world is nonetheless realizing from his war, however, otherwise ill-managed and ill-planned. Then there's the renewed blockade of Iran's ports that Mr. Trump actually decreed Monday. It wouldn't require the U.S. Navy to sail into the dangerously restricted waters of the Persian Gulf. The blockade could be enforced by long-range air operations plus ship interceptions in open seas. Only the second part of the Trump plan, involving active U.S. protection for friendly vessels, entails risky operations. But a Trump tax of 20% of cargo value would also have guaranteed few takers. Alas, the latter stipulation disappeared in 24 hours with another Trump tweet, removing the one element that perhaps made the plan workable. This column has long maintained that a major operation to wrest control of the Persian Gulf would be recommitting to a strategic past that accorded excessive primacy to the Gulf and its oil. Essentially closing the Gulf to all users to starve out Iran is actually the coercive measure realistically proportionate to U.S. interest. That seemed to be the Trump plan on Monday. Will it survive even long enough for this column to reach you? Doubtful. Mr. Trump previously shrank from the necessary cost and risks to make good on his otherwise failed Iran gambit. These include high gasoline prices at home, damage to the world economy, possible instability in local allies. Kuwait would be stuck without an oil outlet. Qatar would have to live off its investments in the Gulf of Mexico. But the lesson of the past 6 months is that the energy blowback can be manageable. There are no guarantees, but the investment might be worthwhile if it forces the Iranian regime to abandon its outlaw and peace breaker stance toward its region and the world, which promised only more conflict down the road. By now, the absence of a major Trump reversal would itself be a major reversal. The press has been waging its own mighty struggle over who won the Iran war, as if it were a sporting event rather than the classic case of politics by other means. Those means have been the real story. No document has been more examined than the U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding, down to the placement of commas, as if the terms meant anything to those jockeying over it. Mr. Trump, with perfect insouciance, can profess a ceasefire exists at the same time he and Iran are exchanging fire. All this is subservient to the primary interest of both Mr. Trump and Iran's surviving leaders: political dominance in their respective domestic spheres. By the first week, I said he was looking for an out from a war that wasn't developing as he hoped. Yet, for every miscalculation, salutatory global forces have been at work in America's favor. These are the same forces of energy realism that just days before the war I said were working to take the wind out of Alberta's separatist movement in Canada. Global energy consumers now have had 6 months to adjust to the unreliability of Persian Gulf oil. Locals are adapting to investing in pipelines to bypass the Strait of Hormuz, investing in military strength to deter Iranian attacks. It's a delicate subject, but Mr. Trump can learn from his predecessors in Iraq and Afghanistan. In America's giant political economy, a continuing overseas military operation like his proposed blockage can rapidly fade in domestic political salience. In Iran, it's the opposite story. While his blockade lasts, gone will be all hope of rebuilding and investment. Iran's leaders have spurned billions of dollars in offered sanctions relief, believing these dollars would still be available anyway once they got done twisting a U.S. president's tail. Not anymore. The concessions they've been avoiding on their nuclear program, proxy allies, missile and drone programs, these are concessions on things beloved by the regime, but of negative value to the Iranian people. Its stance won't be sustainable by a regime rationally interested in its own survival under conditions where most of its revenues and imports are cut off. All good things follow. The regime's strategic and ideological self-importance will necessarily dwindle. So will its domestic authority. The oil curse will lay less heavily on its people, as it already has its neighbors. Oil-rich governments once typically didn't need to care whether their subjects were enterprising, productive, and educated. In fact, it seemed better for rulers if they weren't. When that ends, suddenly the world becomes a much better place. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Wealth taxes would hit the young hardest. With less capital to drive productivity, workers will earn less while still having to support retirees. By Dimitri Burstein. Gavin Newsom recently proposed a national minimum tax on Americans worth more than $100 million. His announcement came shortly after an initiative for a 5% tax on billionaire wealth qualified for California's November ballot. The governor objects to California's version of the wealth tax because it would be difficult to enforce. Billionaires could simply move their wealth to states with lower taxes, depriving his state of tax revenue. The fight belongs at the federal level, he wrote on Substack. Wealth taxes are gaining political traction, and several states have proposed variants. Ideology alone isn't driving such initiatives. Demographics also play a role. The proposals are symptoms of an aging population searching for someone else to pay bills that are increasingly difficult to cover. As with many treatments focused on symptoms rather than causes, the underlying disease will be left worse. Herbert Hoover once remarked that blessed are the young, for they shall inherit the national debt. He meant it as a joke, but it looks like a prediction. For much of the modern era, the young inherited something better than their parents had, including a larger and stronger economy with a tax base capable of supporting the promises made to earlier generations. This intergenerational compact is now reversing because of an aging population and declining birth rate. In 1963, the average woman in the U.S. had 3.27 children. Today, she has about 1.6. The replacement rate at which the population holds steady over the long term is 2.1. A generation ago, sub-replacement fertility mainly was confined to a handful of European countries. In 2025, the United Nations reported that more than half of all countries are below replacement. The global fertility rate in 1963 was 5.3. Today, it's 2.2. Europe sits at 1.4, China at 1, and South Korea at 0.7. Public pensions were designed around a high ratio of workers to retirees. In 1960, the U.S. had roughly 5 workers paying Social Security taxes for each beneficiary. Today, the ratio is less than 3 to 1, and it's projected to decline to 2 within a decade. As this ratio falls, the average cost per worker rises, and the government faces uncomfortable choices: raise taxes, cut benefits, lift the retirement age, or borrow. It has largely chosen to borrow, the option that feels painless because it sends the bill forward. The Congressional Budget Office projects that federal debt, driven largely by entitlement spending and compound interest, will exceed 155% of gross domestic product within 30 years, a level unseen since World War II. With the ratio of workers to retirees shrinking, the temptation to reach for the largest bucket of money becomes irresistible. This explains why wealth taxes have acquired a renewed popularity. California's ballot measure and Mr. Newsom's national tax proposal are both expressions of the same demographic and fiscal forces. But taxing capital to finance consumption reduces the base a smaller workforce needs to maintain and increase productivity. The only way fewer workers can sustain high living standards is for each worker to become more productive, and productivity is built on capital investment in innovation, machines, research, and factories. Consuming that capital today means less investment tomorrow, which will translate into slower productivity growth and lower wages for a smaller workforce. The international record isn't promising. A dozen European countries have levied wealth taxes, and most abandoned them after capital fled and revenue disappointed. The damage, however, lingered. Wealth tax proponents seem determined to pour new wine into old wineskins, ignoring these lessons. Mr. Newsom's national tax proposal would keep billionaires from moving their money from state to state, but wouldn't prevent them from taking it outside the U.S. There's no easy solution. America can't solve its fiscal problems with babies, immigrants, or robots. Some governments have spent billions on pro-natalist policies with negligible results. This is because the forces suppressing fertility are structural, including housing cost, later marriage, expanded opportunities for women, and changing preferences. Immigration simply defers the problem. Immigrants also age and retire, and their birth rates converge with the national average within a generation or two. Productivity-driven economic growth is the most promising path to fiscal stability, but betting pension solvency on technological breakthroughs is a hope, not a strategy. Short of a spontaneous baby boom, the appropriate response to pension-driven fiscal problems is to stop charging the future for the present. Index retirement ages to current lifespans rather than to historic markers set when people died younger. Shift pensions from defined benefit to defined contribution models, and move risk off government balance sheets as Australia did in the 1980s and 1990s. Means test benefits so that support flows to those who actually need it, not to the wealthy who don't. And if revenue must rise, favor consumption taxes which fall on spending rather than on the capital and income on which a shrinking workforce depends. Each of these actions would do more for budget solvency than any wealth tax could. None of this is comfortable, but the alternative is a disorderly adjustment later through inflation, or a fiscal crisis more painful than reform today. Wealth taxes appear seductive because they promise to spare everyone discomfort. But as Europe has demonstrated, and Milton Friedman long argued, the surest way to destroy wealth is to destroy the incentive to create it. Edmund Burke describes society as a partnership between the living, the dead, and the unborn. For much of our American history, that partnership ran in one direction, with parents sacrificing so that their children might inherit something better. The wealth tax movement inverts it, asking the young to watch their inheritance of productive capital be consumed to preserve present entitlements. A wealth tax doesn't make the rich pay their fair share. It makes the young and the not yet born pay for the retired. Mr. Bernsheim is a principal at Eminence Advisory, an Australian consulting firm. Letters to the editor. Topic: America inspired my family. I couldn't agree more with Scott Atlas. The selfie generation is the baby boomers' mistake. My family immigrated legally from Hong Kong to the U.S. when I was 10 years old. My parents worked menial jobs to support us and never took a dime from any government program. Through hard work, my siblings and I learned English and studied hard. My sister and I went on to become physicians, and my brother an engineer. America's promise of opportunity inspired us, not handouts. From Hilma M.U., Black Mountain, North Carolina. Another letter. We are a country of equals. Regarding William A. Galston's equality is the core of American identity, Mr. Galston rightly reminds us that equality is America's defining principle. I would suggest that our equality runs even deeper. We aren't equal because we possess the same talent, wealth, education, or opportunity. We are equal because every human being bears the same inherent worth, the spark of our Creator. Rights flow from that truth, not the other way around. As America begins its next 250 years, recovering that understanding may be our best path toward renewal. From Chris G. Neely, Lexington, South Carolina. Now for the credit markets rates. A money market annual rate is 0.44%. A 5-year CD is 1.72%. Compared to last week and now, a 30-year mortgage was 6.57%, now 6.61. A 15-year mortgage fixed rate was 5.98%, now 6.06. A jumbo mortgage was 6.55%, now 6.63. A 5-year adjustable mortgage was 5.93%, now 6.07%. A new car loan, 48 months, remains 6.95%. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 15th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Corrine. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day or evening.